Hey everybody, welcome back to the studio today. I hope you are doing well. I had a few questions from people asking about how I did the color on these logos on my SD mugs. So I thought we'd cover that today, cover the wash that I put on and then the wax, and then talk about how I glaze over top of that. So let's go. Alright, so what you will need for this process is some red iron oxide, which if you're into pottery, you know exactly what red iron oxide is. You've probably used it in a glaze or at some point. At least this was one of the first chemicals as far as glazes or anything that I ever used. I will never forget red iron oxide. You will need red iron oxide, you will need water and a bowl to mix that red iron oxide wash. And then you will need, later we will use this liquid form of wax here. So you can buy any of these at any pottery supply store. You can get the red iron oxide, you can get the liquid wax. You've got a paintbrush around your studio, I'm sure, and you've got a second that's a bowl somewhere that you can use this for. So that's what you'll need for this. I don't measure the mixture that I do for my red iron oxide wash, but I basically take water and then I put a spoon or a scoop of some kind of red iron oxide in there, and really I just do this by sight as far as the thickness. It's thinner than a glaze, but it definitely has some thickness to it as far as you can see. It's very, very red, very irony, and what you do as far as my main test is what it looks like once I put it on the mug. So you can see all these that I've done so far. Actually, I already started recording, and I listened back to my recording and something was wrong with my microphone and there was all kinds of crackly noise. So yeah, you could have been hearing this. So instead I decided to record again and basically say all the same stuff again in a little bit different way and without the crackly noise. So that's where we are now. But anyway, so what we're doing is taking the brush, and I constantly stir this as I'm using it because that iron oxide is going to settle in the water, and I want to keep it stirred up. And what I'm really looking for is that when I brush it on, it's liquid enough to go down into all of the cracks, but it's still potent enough that it's giving that nice dark brown coating on all this area that I'm trying to cover here. And I try my best not to get off of this logo, but it's not really going to affect the way I'm glazing these too much, so I'm not too worried about it, but it will make a mess, so I just try to keep it as much where I want it as I can. And I'm about to sneeze, so woo! 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 A little added extra at the end there for you. Anyway, so we are just basically painting this iron oxide wash on these logos, and I usually do 4 to 6 of these at a time, and then I come back and I wipe the excess off to get the look of what you see over here, and then I go back with brushing more on. I could probably do the whole board, but I just kind of so I don't get bored, I do a few and then I wipe them off, and then I brush on a few more, and that to me just keeps things interesting, keeps things moving along and progressing. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. We'll finish up putting this wash on about 6 of these, and then I'll blow my nose and we'll get back to showing you the next step of wiping the excess off with a sponge. Alright, so now what we do is we take a sponge, and I have my bucket of water here next to me, and all I do is just wipe the excess off, and I rotate the sponge because as the excess is coming off, if you don't rotate the sponge, you will get more and more of this on the edge here as you wipe the excess off. It'll just kind of smear it all over the cup or whatever it is that you have to smear it all over your pot, no matter if it's on a cup or not. But that's what I'm going for, just wiping that excess off, and then like I said, rotating the sponge as I do that to get a fresh area of the sponge. And then each mug, as I finish that mug, I keep my bucket of water here so that I can rinse the sponge out to start with a fresh sponge. But what I'm looking for is to, like I said, wipe that excess off from the majority of the mug, but not wipe it enough that it gets any of it out of the grooves there, which is hard to get it out of the grooves anyway, which is the whole point of doing that. You get that dark, nice, or that nice dark color down in the grooves. And if you wipe too much, at least with these, because the S and the D in the middle are not real deep or real narrow grooves, it's easy to wipe the excess out of those. So I try not to wipe that too much in the center, because I want to leave some of that iron oxide wash down in those grooves in the center. So I try to go around the edge as much as possible and then leave some of that in the middle. And like I said, there's always a little bit of cleanup around the outside that you have to do. But like I said before, this is not going to, having that little bit of excess is not going to affect the glazes that I'm working with, or at least I assume it's not based on my experience in the past, so I'm not too worried about that. But we'll wipe off these other three, and you'll get a really good idea of how this is working. Now this one, like I can already see, this one, the D is not stamped real deep in the center, so it's going to wash away a little bit more of that than I would like, but you'll still be able to read it around the edge, and you'll still be able to see that D. It just won't get the nice, you don't have those nice crisp lines like you do on a couple of these other ones. We have a whole nother board of these after this one, so we'll either skip forward to the waxing or we'll do a little bit of time lapse and then come back to it. But either way, we'll see you in just a minute. And we're back again with the most, probably the most tedious part of this whole process, because as I said before about the liquid wax here, if I get this on any part of the cup other than where I want the wax, then I have to let that dry. I have to sand that down so that whenever I glaze them, that wax doesn't resist the glaze, which is the whole point of putting it on the logos. So this is something you have to be very careful about. You know, not that it ruins the piece if you get it on another part. It's just very time consuming and just frustrating if you get it elsewhere. So and also trying to get all the wax down in all these little parts. It's like I said, just very tedious and time consuming, but of course I just find that if I start in a pattern, it helps me. So I usually do the center, and then I'll fill in the bottom words here, and I'll go around the edge, turning the cup as I go, and trying to get enough in the spots where I have the words that I can get it down into all those grooves, and then working my way around, trying to. The good thing about this logo being raised is that I can get the edge of this. I don't have to do the side of the logo, but I do want to get all of the top edge, and so I can do that all the way around the edge, and it does brush enough wax on the top there that when I glaze, majority of the glaze does run off of the logo, and then what little bit gets down in some of these grooves, I still have to come back with a needle tool after I glaze and clean some of that excess glaze off of the logo. So this is still not the end. After I glaze, I still have to come back and wipe a little bit excess off with a sponge, and then get a needle tool and clean out any of the excess glaze that gets down in any of these grooves or in the letters, because I don't want that glaze to be filling in the letters to where you can't read them, or just having a little splash of color here in the middle of my logo where it's not supposed to be. So this whole process is very tedious, and so any times that I've quoted making custom logo mugs, it's usually pretty expensive because I know how much time it takes. And when I first started making these, I didn't necessarily think about all that. But either way, like I said, I wanted to make these affordable for people to enjoy these. I've already got one board of these actually already done. I was just listening to a podcast, and I got going on waxing a whole board of them, and when I got done I thought, well, if I am going to include this on a video, I better do it now. Anyway, so I'm probably going to go back and listen to the podcast some more, because I would do a time lapse of this, but it would be pretty repetitive, and then it would tie up my phone. And when I'm doing anything that's this repetitive, I find it really useful to then have a podcast or something going that I can entertain my mind, and have that going so that I don't go crazy doing all this tedious work here. But I thought I'd bring you guys back at least to show you what I'm working on as far as the wax goes. I'll finish these here. After that dries, you'll be able to see it. It's just kind of a satin matte finish. And then the glaze, I'll bring you guys back tomorrow when I glaze some of these and show you some of that process and how we glaze these. Now that I have the bottoms waxed, and I'll have the logos waxed, and it just does make that process a whole lot easier, which is worth the tediousness now to make that process easier later. So either way, anyway, thank you guys for being here, of course, and I hope you guys are learning something from this. And if you ever want to attempt this, I hope I'm giving you some tips. And I'll see you guys tomorrow when I get these all waxed and we go to start glazing. So anyway, see you guys then. Alright, and we are back getting ready to glaze more of these SD mugs. As you can see, all of the logos, the color is still on there. The wax is now dry on those. And we're getting ready to glaze some more of these. These I have already dipped the top in my special glaze that gives me all the crazy glaze interaction. And I'm going to dip these 4 in this purple. And I've got some of those back there that are going to go in my darker blue that I have. And I have a bunch over here that are going to go in my rutile blue as well. So I just thought I would bring you guys back and show you this and how these come out of the glaze once I dip them in there. I am going to be using tongs to dip these. I did wax the bottom of these mainly because I knew I was going to be glazing the whole pot in basically a solid color. Plus the shape of these, it's actually better to wax the bottom on these. I don't use a whole lot of wax as far as waxing the bottoms of pots. A lot of pots I actually pour the glaze on the inside and then I dip the outside. Just my preferred way of doing it, especially if it has a foot that I can hold on to. I may show you guys that in just a minute. I thought about that earlier. But these are waxed on the bottom, so I'm just going to use the tongs and dip them in this purple here, and then you'll see the glaze that does run off of the logo here, minus a little bit that I have to clean up, and then I'll show you that process of cleaning out any of the excess, and that'll pretty much wrap up today's video. And then hopefully the next time you see these mugs, they will be coming out of out on a kiln unloading video, and that'll be very exciting for everybody involved. So anyway, we're going to glaze these 4 here in the purple, and then I'll show you probably how I do traditional glazing as far as inside and outside of a cup, especially if I'm doing a solid color. Alright, what I normally do if I have a pot, especially if it has a foot like this that I can hold on to, These have that little foot, but still, these I know I can hold and dip like this without my fingers getting in the way, and these are pretty hard to do that. So if I know I have a pot that has that little foot, I normally don't wax the bottom because it's just much easier not to. And I also, a lot of pieces I also spray ash glaze on the bottom, but even if I wasn't, or even when I do that, I don't wax the bottom because I'm going to spray ash and it's going to be sitting flat on the surface when I spray that ash, and then I can just clean up any excess that might run down a little bit close to the edge. But if I am glazing a solid color, I still don't wax, and I don't dip the whole pot with tongs. Normally what I'll do is I take my measuring cup, I pour it inside, and then I pour that out, and then I just hold it and dip it down, you know, to where it's close to that foot, and then just let it ride. And so that to me saves a whole lot of time. I don't have to worry about waxing the pot, and I get the whole pot covered by doing that. So I can just take this and then turn it as I'm pouring it out like that, and then hold it by that foot and dip down. And sometimes it's good to kind of wiggle it back and forth to get the glaze to level out where you want it. And then there we go. And then the only tricky part about that is you have to then get it set down on your table. And I usually use the edge of the table and kind of set it there and scoot it over. That one I got a little bit farther down than I wanted to on that one side, but either way, that's normally how I glaze my pot, especially if I'm doing a solid color, or if I'm doing that little bit of the bottom glaze and then a glaze and a solid color over that. Still works the same. But anyway, that'll probably wrap up today's video. Well, no, actually, I got to show you how I clean out the how I got to clean out the logos, not Legos. All right, we'll be right back. So you can see on this mug here how you've got glaze that, even though I waxed this, it got down into the circles around. This is a pretty bad example, actually, or one where I got a lot of glaze on the logo, and I still have to clean that excess off because this is the no matter what glaze that is, but this is the purple, and I would probably have purple that would be in that groove there and maybe even run down over the logo, who knows, and get that excess cleaned up out of there. And so I normally just take a needle tool, and once this dries, I don't do it right after I dip it, but I just have to take a needle tool, and it's usually not too hard to clean out of there because it's in the grooves and you can just follow that groove along. And then I try to get it out of the letters as well if it gets into those, because I don't want those turning colors either or looking different. I would like that red iron oxide wash that I put down in there to stand out the most. So like I said, good thing about that, the groove that's there, is that your needle tool can just follow along that groove and clean most of that out. And so I'm sure by the time this video is over, it's probably going to dissuade most of you from ever making logo mugs, and that might be a good idea, to be honest with you, because this is, as I've said multiple times, this is some very tedious work. And although you do get some really neat results, it is not the easiest process, and I've not been looking forward to some of it. I don't know. I just kind of thought, well, man, am I getting lazy, or is it just that I've got to do a lot of work that I'm not used to doing, and it makes it more dreadful to do in a way. So, and then I'm going to take my sponge too and wipe that little bit of excess off there, just to make sure that I get that a little bit cleaned up there. And I might go back with a needle tool and grab that last little bit that's in the bottom there, but you can see a drastic difference between that and what it did look like just a minute ago. But anyway, so now I gotta clean out the rest of these that I just glazed, and then I've got probably another 20 or so to glaze, let those dry, and I'll have to clean all those out as well. And but that'll be it. So as always, thank you guys for being here. Appreciate your support on the channel, and I know many of you are looking forward to getting yourself one of these mugs, whether you live local and you've already placed an order, or whether you're waiting for them to be on Etsy. But I do have maybe about 30 to 40 extra that I can put on Etsy that I know of right now, and whether I'll make any more or not, I'm not sure yet. But if I have enough people that want them, then I will probably make another batch. But just how tedious this has been, I'm like, man, I don't know if I want to go through this anymore. So anyway, I'm glad I'm doing these because they'll be a nice keepsake for you guys. And anyway, thank you guys so much, as I said, for being here and supporting the channel. Don't forget to subscribe before you go. Hit the notification bell so you're notified when I have new videos. And yeah, thanks for sharing this and liking it. And we'll see you guys in the next video. Thanks. Bye.